Pantheon, one of the most iconic champions in the game. Since its release, this champion has been a staple in many metas. Although he's been pick-banned in many different roles, today Pantheon struggles to find even a single role that he's considered dominant in. Mainly due to the fact that he was so overpowered in the support role, Pantheon has been repeatedly nerfed and nerfed until his flat damage has become a shadow of what it once was. Very few people try to make Pantheon work, and even fewer people try to one-trick him. Today there is a grand total of 1 person who has hit Challenger playing nothing but Pantheon. This video is about Spearshot, the #1 Pantheon player in the world.
Hey guys, my name is Isa, but people know me as Spearshot. I'm known for getting high challenger one-trick ponying Pantheon top. The issue is not many people play Pantheon top lane. They see him more of as like a flex pick mid. I mean, you can find people that play him top, but it's hard to find challengers that play him top because he's often considered really difficult to make work topside. With mid lane, there are certain matchups that are just objectively impossible to win. You get matchups like Syndra or Rihanna, Azir, and there's pretty much nothing you can do apart from try to like salvage some CS. Top lane, like at worst, like the worst possible matchups, Poppy, Gragas, Gangplank, they have some form of counterplay and some form of skill expression. If played correctly, you can win pretty much every matchup. Because with mid lane, you can play around your empowered W, and a majority of the matchups, if you can get an empowered W off, you're winning. Doesn't work like that top lane. You're versing like bruiser heavy matchups, tanks, that if you just empower W to them when you're both at 100% HP, you're not going to win that fight. Because if you can space correctly, you can beat all the engaged champs. They can't touch you. Your Q length is 600 range. Most champs can't trade back every time you Q. Ideally, you want to be landing Qs without getting hit. If you can Q Darius and not get hit, that's pretty much the only way to win lane. Because if you Q Darius and he lands his Q on you, you're losing that trade. And there's a mental image you should have in mind. Assume your Q length is like a circle around you, and don't let anybody into that circle. Pantheon will lose to a good majority of top laners within auto range. Whether it's a Jax, whether it's a Fiora, whether it's a Camille, they will all beat you within auto range, so you're just trying to avoid that.
Basically, instead of thinking of Pantheon as an all-engaged champion, think about him sort of like a ranged champion. When you use your Q without charging it, the cooldown is immediately 6 seconds at rank 1. The mana cost is fairly low, so this ability is fairly spammable in the early game. When you use an AoE ability like Pantheon's Q over and over again, you're going to be naturally pushing the wave. Most people don't want this to happen, as it can set you up to being ganked fairly early on. Since most junglers tend to start bot side in order to get the best leech they possibly can, it makes Spearshot a perfect target for being killed at level 3. But Isa isn't afraid of this. Instead, he's actually trying to get the jungler topside to fight in a 1v2.
I wouldn't recommend this, and I especially wouldn't recommend this if someone's like first timing Pantheon or they're trying to learn him. I try and set my wave up so my wave's big enough to where if I do get ganked, I can at the very worst trade a 1-for-1. And my logic is, well, if I'm forcing pressure from the map, I can trade a 1-for-1, which is great because now I'm going to get solo XP in the kill, my laner isn't, and my wave's pushing in, right? So it's just going to bounce back into me. So if I can do that, it usually sets tempo and we're just winning the game. It also morally kind of destroys enemy jungle if he shows top and I kill him, right? There are very few champs in the game that can fight Pantheon at level 3. He's a unit at level 3. He's one of the best champs in the game at level 3. Usually people try and avoid the gank. I'm baiting it. And I'm not saying I'm a gangster, but like I know the limits on Pantheon, and depending on enemy jungler, yeah, I'll often bait a gank.
Unlike other one-tricks who claim that their champion is weak or ruined by Riot, Isa will tell you over and over again,
Pantheon's so busted, man. My champ's not balanced. Pantheon's broken. My champion's busted beyond belief. I'll tell you that for free. Pantheon's broken. I said it for years. No one believes me. It's not the champ, yeah? It's you.
Pantheon might not be a very healthy champion, but you know what could make you a healthy person? HelloFresh, the sponsor of today's video. When I got my first HelloFresh box, I wasn't quite sure what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be more of a meal delivery service similar to what grocery stores have, but it's actually very different. It's got this awesome packaging with everything portioned out perfectly for you with each individual meal. Even if you're not a Challenger Elo cook, it really doesn't matter because with the way that HelloFresh is set up, pretty much anyone can put these meals together. Really, HelloFresh isn't comparable to other meal delivery services. It's not really a meal delivery service. It's more like Lunchables for adults. But instead of cold pizza, you get nice gourmet hamburgers, steak, and pasta. When you get a HelloFresh box, it's not just for sustenance and nutrition, it's actually pretty fun to put one of these meals together. With 50 weekly options, including a rotating selection of items at the HelloFresh market, there are plenty of delicious dishes to choose from no matter the occasion. Use my link or go to HelloFresh.com and use the code POGDHJune16 for a free 16 meals plus 3 surprise gifts across 6 HelloFresh boxes plus free shipping. Once you click, my description will live update to count up the number of purchases. One of the main differences between how Spearshot plays in the early game is how he utilizes Ignite. Whereas most top laners will use Ignite in the middle or near the end of a fight, Spearshot tends to Ignite very early into the engagement. And there's several different reasons for this. One, he's okay trading a TP for Ignite. At Challenger Elo, most people know the amount of damage that everybody does fairly well. They know that Pantheon is a very dominant champion in the early game, so usually Ignite isn't going to be enough to cheese kill someone. What he's often trying to do is trade this summoner for another summoner such as Flash or Teleport. Since both of those summoners have double the cooldown, it's a very worthy trade at the end of the day. The second most important factor is getting someone below 20% HP as quickly as possible. When you hit Pantheon Spear on someone below 20%, it essentially crits. Most Challenger players know that Pantheon's Q has an execute, so they usually back off and reset as quickly as possible instead of trying to lane against a Pantheon that's going to be dealing double damage. In today's game, even forcing someone off of 2 minion waves is enough to be able to get a substantial lead on someone. Just because the scoreboard doesn't reflect it doesn't mean you're not massively ahead. Now, when you do get an advantage in the early game, you're supposed to usually buy more damage. But Spearshot never buys more damage. He almost always, no matter the situation, rushes tier 2 boots. Why are boots better than pure lethality?
I rush tabbies often, or I rush boots, because Pantheon's immobile by default, pretty much, right? So if you're versing champs like pretty much any top laner, you need that sort of mobility to actually keep you relevant in the lane. I mean, if you put it into perspective, let's say I'm versing a Darius and I get a lead. I get damage, I get a pickaxe. And then I come back to lane and he's got a longsword and boots. Because he has that extra mobility advantage from boots, it's just a little bit easier for him to land his Q when I try and land my Q. So when I try and space properly and land my Q without him being able to retaliate, it's way more difficult. And that sudden change in movement speed really will make the difference in the lane. So I often try and get boots if he's gonna get boots. If he can get boots before I can, let's say he finishes tabbies and then I built a serrated Dirk, he's probably gonna win that lane. Sure, I can land my Qs, but now he can land his abilities too. And regardless of, you know, whether I have a serrated Dirk against the tabbies or not, if he lands a Q for my Q, I'm losing the trade.
So, if you're playing Pantheon and you lose the early game, what are you supposed to do? FF? Spam surrender? Flame your teammates? After all, you are Pantheon. If your early game isn't strong, what are you going to do the rest of the game?
Yeah, a lot of people think Pantheon's late game is bad, and I think that stems from the fact that his mid game is bad. 3 or 4 item Pantheon beats a majority of champions, like a good chunk of top laners. And I don't mean like a small majority, like 55%. I think he beats 80% of top laners after 4 items. I can't think of many top laners that can beat him outside of, you know, a few exceptional champs like Jax and maybe KO or some, you know, heavy late game champs. Slowly push into that end game or late game, you hit level 16 and get 30% armor pen from your R, which really isn't negligible. Like, that's a lot. You're back in the game, like you're massively relevant. When I'm behind or I'm going even, I just try and wait for my second item power spike, and in this case it's pretty much always a cleaver. Cleaver just adds so much to Pantheon's kit once you have an eclipse, because you have the damage, you're just lacking HP and you're lacking ability haste, so you can constantly, you know, flick through your abilities in the middle of a fight. I don't think a champion can use cleaver as well as Pantheon can. Whereas if you built a Serelda's, not only are you lacking the HP, but you're the only one that has the armor pen. Here's the great thing about Pantheon, I can E multiple targets. So in theory, I can proc my E on 5 targets and get 30% armor shred on the whole team. But obviously that's in theory, so you're more likely to be able to do it to 2 or 3.
Think about it like this. With Pantheon's R, you'll be getting a flat 30% armor penetration. With Black Cleaver and a full combo, they'll have another 30% reduced. PTA will increase the amount of damage you'll be doing by about 8 to 12%. Along with the flat lethality from your other items, you're pretty much doing true damage to most champions in the late game. It doesn't matter if an ADC has Randuin's or if a mage has armor from Zhonya's, you're still likely going to be able to one-shot them without issue from your full combo. So this looks pretty broken. What actually counters Pantheon? What actually stops him?
If my laner has resolved, then there's a chance he could be running bone plating. And if he's running bone plating and I impale W into him under the first wave, I'm always going to lose. The bone plating is literally going to make my impale W do 0 damage. Also, champs that are like heavy split push champs that can abuse Hullbreaker really well, it's very hard for me to actually play into that because champs like Tryndamere or Yorick have such good 1v1 potential on the side lane, which Pantheon lacks. His late game isn't too bad, but his mid game definitely suffers severely, especially when you're versing champs like that, so they can abuse Pantheon really well. A lot of it is he doesn't have a 1v1 ult, you know? Often you'll get dived on the tower unless you have a lead. The champs that can abuse Hullbreaker really well and sit on the side lane and force pressure from the map, it's hellish for Pantheon. He just, like, you can't keep up with them. They'll slowly push into you and they'll slowly get good trades and then they'll slowly dive you. That's literally what will happen. And there's not much you can do because, you're not really a duelist.
During the mid game, you're pretty much just waiting for your items and going for picks around the map with your ult. Instead of trying to beat a 1v1 split pusher, push the wave to a point where the enemy laner will be forced to respond to you. Then run towards the rest of your team and make an engagement. This forces either a 4v5 or makes the enemy laner burn a teleport.
Well, I think the major difference between Challenger Pantheons and D1 Pantheons, I say Challenger Pantheons when I'm pretty much the only one, right? But the difference between me and, let's say, a D1 Pantheon would be I'm just a lot more aggressive, so I try and look and pursue a lead. Whereas a D1 would play it a little more either recklessly and just die, or he just wouldn't know the limits as well. And later on into the game, when he's casting R for fights, sometimes you just have to take into account that there are some comps you cannot R into. So if you're versing, let's say, a Thresh or an Alistar, and then they have like a Syndra mid lane, that's probably a comp you just shouldn't be R'ing into. But you have to kind of accept that there are some comps you just need to show up with your team and you can't sit on the side lane. If you have like a Fed carry, then great, you can just play as like a support Pantheon, keep that carry alive, keep enemy team off your ADC. What draws me to Pantheon the most is the fact that he can be played in, a plethora of ways. So in a sense, he can be played into pretty much every matchup because he's so versatile. And same thing applies for other roles too. Like if I get filled in the jungle, I'm fine. I play Pantheon. If I get filled in mid, I'm fine. If I get filled in support, I'm fine. And I like that aspect of Pantheon. I like how versatile he is. He's like a Swiss knife. He can in theory do everything. Hey Fatty, how'd that taste? Dude, please stop, man. Please! Ah! Oh my god. I'm alive! I knew it. Ah! I clicked here, but I clicked on my HUD by accident. Fuck! Why didn't I E? No! What the fuck are you doing? There's no way you just solo lose the game like that, you fucking gremlin. You win the game if you E him, dude. Why are you Wing? Fuck you and your W. Why did you E?
Spearshot's personality is very much like Pantheon's playstyle. Aggressive, loud, full of anger, and always going in. If this is the playstyle that appeals to you, then Pantheon is the perfect champion that you should pick up.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to check me out, you can tune into my streams at twitch.tv/spear_shot.